Hello, friends. Welcome to Today in the Word. Today we are talking with Dr. John Kessler, who is the author of our study, Hope in the Hurt. It's on the book of Lamentations. I'll show you a little bit of cover art there. This is an Old Testament book of the Bible written by the prophet Jeremiah. And our author, John Kessler, is professor emeritus at Moody Bible Institute and the author of many books. His most recent is titled On Things Above, The Earthly Importance of Heavenly Reality, and it's now available on Amazon. And so I would encourage you to get that as well. Welcome, John.
Hi, Janie. Good to be with you.
It's good to be with you too. And as we study this, the subject of Lamentations, and then kind of off of that, kind of dive into the idea of lament. What is lament? Certainly it's associated with pain and grief. John and I actually started this conversation earlier this month and were interrupted by an internet outage. And as we're coming back to it, we've just landed off of this horrible news event of the flood in Texas and so many people grieving lives lost. And it's been on my mind and heart that sometimes God orchestrates, I think, the way we study his word to speak to us at different times in our life. So as we go through this study on Lamentations, it's certainly a different topic and not the same type of tragic event, but yet our response to it is difficult sometimes and complex. And so perhaps this will help us finding hope in the hurt in many situations in our lives, whether corporate or national or personal. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. John, I was thinking about the book and why it's so important that a book like this appears in the Bible, because it's not an easy book to read. But why is that important to us?
Well, I think it's important because the kind of grief that Jeremiah is writing about is so much a part of human experience. And it's a book that not only validates our own grief when we read it, which I think is important. I think it's one of the things that people who are going through an experience like that, there's comfort in knowing that others have experienced it. But I think the thing that's really important about the way that Jeremiah talks about it is that he locates God in that, in that space of grief. In fact, God's faithfulness is literally at the center of the book. It's the heartbeat of what Jeremiah talks about. And I think that's the main thing. I think there is a sense where we read it and we say, oh, I know exactly what that feeling is like. I know exactly what that experience is like. But I think it's Jeremiah not only says, oh, yeah, everybody feels grief. He clearly identifies God's presence in the wreckage of that experience. And I think that's really critical.
Yes, and he doesn't shy away from the details of what's causing the grief. He clearly goes there and talks about it explicitly, which sometimes feels shocking when you read this book and a little bit overwhelming.
Yes, it's the frankness of it, both the sort of the bare description of both the suffering. This is a book that was written out of a context of extreme suffering, and also the honesty with which Jeremiah speaks both about what people have experienced and his own feelings toward God. And I also think he is, in a representative sense, he's speaking on behalf of the people who have suffered. There are times when you read it and you almost want to turn your face away because it is too real. And I don't think I think it's not that you read it and you say, oh, I can't believe anything like that could ever happen. It's that you read it and you know exactly what he's talking about. And you would rather, there's a part of us that really would like to not acknowledge it. And that's why often one of the first responses to tragic circumstance is what they call denial. It's, you're just, your gut reaction when you hear of something is, oh, that didn't happen. No, that can't be true. In fact, that's what people will literally say often. That can't be true.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, it takes a minute for your mind to comprehend it, and almost you almost have to force yourself to grapple with it.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's in some ways it's I suppose a childish response, like we want to cover our eyes and just not see it, but it's also a coping.
Yeah, I don't think it's childish. I think it's human. I
Yeah,
think I think it's a very natural. Actually, I, ironically, I think there are two human responses, and it depends on where you are in the experience. One response is the response to look away, to say I can't bear the sight of that, and I don't think we have to feel guilty about feeling that way. And in fact, this is one of the reasons that the Book of Lamentations can be a great help to us, because it does provide us with a kind of vocabulary to speak about it. So if we are speechless and and I can't really bear to concentrate on it, it can help us do that. The other uniquely human, and maybe this is, I don't know if it's a function of our sin nature, but just one of the peculiar responses is the exact opposite. It's that sense of people talking about you can't look away. When you see a car accident or something, you see
right,
things start to unfold where you can't look away. And you also see that, in our contemporary experience, something tragic happens, some great event, and it is replayed for us, constantly on television, on social media. You see the images over and over and over and over again. And strangely enough, when you see them coming up again, you don't say, "Oh, I've seen that. I don't want to look at that anymore." Something about it, you
compels you.
watch it, so that I can remember a number of, great national tragedies where I would just watch the news, for hours, and they'd just be showing the same thing, the same thing, the same thing, and even just saying the same things for hours on end. So there are these two responses, but I think in the personal side of it, it becomes a different kind of experience. It's one thing to go through it and to feel the experience of it, and there's another to sort of watch it as a spectator. And the danger of that other side of it is that it almost becomes a form of entertainment, and
Right.
that becomes can become very unhealthy. Is very unhealthy, really, if you think about it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think what's important too, Jeremiah was a spokesperson for God in that it weaves together that desperation and grief and sadness with God. Like God is there, like you said, running through it and purposeful in it. And so I think that maybe there's things we can derive from that too, as far as how we lament, like that we lament with God connected to it, so that it's not just a personal dwelling on things.
Well, that helps you define what lament
Mhm.
is and how lament differs from just, you know, the relationship between lament and grief. So grief and sorrow, horror, all of there's a whole thesaurus of emotions that are connected with these kinds of experiences. They have to do with the way we feel about them. Lament is how we talk about it. So lament is one's grief or sadness expressed. And more than that, when you're talking about lament, as Jeremiah is practicing it, it is this grief and sadness expressed to God. So it's more than just an expression of grief. It is grief that is placed within the framework of what God is doing, or acknowledging. I think it's maybe better to look at it this way, that it is an acknowledgement of the reality of God's presence in those circumstances. And as we said a minute ago, I think what happens is a kind of often speechlessness, that we just don't know what to say when something happens. You get terrible news, something awful happens. There's a loss of somebody that you love, and the effect of it isn't just momentary. It goes on, for months, even years. Um, even decades. In fact, when you're talking about the kind of grief that Jeremiah is writing about, he's talking about generations. This is something that goes on for generations, and you need a kind of vocabulary to talk about it. And that is one of the things that, well, there are several places in the scriptures that help you do that. Lamentations is one of the most concentrated. Another larger, in a sense, more general framework are the book of Psalms, which we just had a book put out by
Mm-hmm.
where you have this variety, and that's not just what the Psalms are about, but so many of the Psalms are where the psalmist is expressing himself to God about his circumstances. And I think it really is very helpful for someone who's struggling. I don't even really know how I feel, first of all, and
Mm-hmm.
I read the scriptures and find myself in it. I don't know how to talk about this. Not only do the scriptures help me find my own voice, but they become a voice for me so that I can speak
Mm.
those words back to God, which, when you think about it, this is what Jesus did on the cross when the cry of dereliction, my God, why have you forsaken me? That's not a cry of despair. That is a citation from the Psalms, which in the context of that psalm promises resurrection. So it is, first of all, on Jesus' part, it is a statement of what's happening to him. And at the same time, by saying that, he is also affirming the whole story as promised by the scriptures. That's one of the things we're doing then when we use the scriptures to frame our own speech, to express our own grief. We're trying to put it in a larger context than the immediate experience.
Right, right. Yeah, relating our sorrow back to God, speaking it to Him. I too have experienced that with the Psalms. That when I'm in a time where I'm struggling to read through one and pray it back to God,
Yeah.
is just it has brought me to tears sometimes, realizing how profoundly it helps me
Yeah.
um, to say what's on my heart.
I'll
Uh,
say one other thing too, even though we're talking about Lamentations, which has to do with expressing and speech. We also don't need to be afraid of our own silence when we're relating to God in grief. I think we are a talkative culture. We're always interacting with words. I mean, here we are chatting away about, and really, it really does. We're just chatting, about things that are so deep and profound that sometimes the more appropriate response is just silence. So I think you do not have to be afraid of your own silence in the presence of God. That
yeah.
there was an old song they used to sing back in the day. Tears are a language that God understands.
Mm.
That really is true. So so that also, what I'm not saying is like, yeah, the best thing to do when you are overcome with grief is just to chatter away. Maybe
Right.
not, but it is also helpful. It can often be helpful to express our feelings and express our grief to God. And that's what Lamentations does.
Very good. Well, I hope that all of you are appreciating the study on Lamentations. I think it is challenging at times, but also can be deeply encouraging, especially if you yourself are navigating a season of pain or unexpected tragedy. Learning from this and leaning into our hope we have in Christ um, can be powerful. And this Old Testament study reminds us of that. Correct, that
Yeah,
that God is there. He is present. He sees us, and He sees you. So, thank you, John. Thanks for
yeah,
talking with me again. And we look forward to the rest of the study.
yeah. My privilege. Thank you.